I'm assuming you guys all have someone in your life or yourself that are at risk of falls, or you need some more information on it. I don't think people really understand how big of an issue this is in our country today, especially for the senior population. So I wanted to share some things that'll probably scare you a little bit, but I think sometimes in order for us to understand the severity of a problem, we have to be scared a little bit. 1 in 4 Americans that are over the age of 65 fall each year. And about every 11 seconds, an older adult is treated in an ER for a fall. And every 19 minutes, an older adult dies from a fall. That's just a crazy number if you think about that. 1 out of 5 falls cause a serious injury, such as a broken bone or a head injury. Falls are the leading fatal injury and the most common cause of non-fatal trauma for hospital admissions among older people. I'll share a few more with you. Each year, there are 3 million older people that are treated in the ER departments for fall injuries. And each year, at least 300,000 older people are hospitalized for hip fractures. More than 95% of hip fractures for people in the senior population are caused by falling, and usually it's caused by falling sideways. And this statistic's really kind of sobering. The 1-year mortality rate in seniors over 60 years old is as high as 58% following injuries related to trips, slips, and falls. In 2015, it's a little dated now, but the total cost of fall injuries was $50 billion to our healthcare network. And Medicare and Medicaid shouldered about 75% of that cost. And the CDC, that's where all this information has come from, was anticipating that that total cost would be up to $67.7 billion by this year for fall-related injuries. The crazy thing is that a lot of these falls can be prevented. They seem to be behavioral modification, awareness of yourself and things that you're dealing with in life. And when you think about the fact that we can really control this on our own, it leads us to believe that there's a good possibility we can keep people from getting in the ERs and falling. And we can't obviously eliminate it altogether, but we can definitely knock it down. So some of the things that can happen in falls we already talked about were fractures, and that can be wrists and shoulders, hips. Those are the most common ones. Hitting your head injuries, brain injuries. One of the things that you have to really be careful with if you fall and hit your head is if you're on blood thinners of any kind, that is something that needs to be checked out immediately. So if you're one of those people that takes the blood thinners and hits your head, you need to call your family physician or get to the ER so they can check you out so you don't have any kind of hemorrhaging or bleeding in your brain. And the last thing that really is sad is that here in therapy, we see it all the time. People that fall and maybe don't get hurt, the long-standing problems that they have is that there's a fear that's developed then. And that fear could be a fear of movement, which is not good. Fear of movement then leads to weakness, which leads to more falls, and you just have this perpetual circle of problems that come about. What conditions make you more likely to fall? Obviously, weakness in your legs and in your trunk. You're not able to correct yourself. You're not able to be as active. Maybe you have a harder time getting out of chairs, getting off of toilets, maybe stair climbing. All those things can be limited because of weakness in your legs. Vitamin D deficiency. That's not enough vitamin D. Difficulties with your walking and your balance. Some people probably need to be on a cane or a walker and they choose not to. That can definitely lead you to a higher risk. Uses of medications, and that could be anything. Tranquilizers, sedatives, antidepressants, some blood pressure medications, anything that can make you lightheaded or dizzy or change your orientation can be a risk for you to fall. And the best thing for you to do if that's something that you're concerned about is go over that list with your doctor. Sometimes they're not aware because we haven't communicated to them that that's a problem. Maybe dosages can be changed on the meds, or maybe there's a different medication they can try. So if that's something you haven't spoken with your doctor about, I'd highly encourage it. Vision problems is another big one. As we age, our vision starts to naturally decline. So if you're not getting your vision checked by the eye doctor routinely, yearly, I would really encourage you to go down that route. Sometimes just changing a prescription with eyeglasses and getting your vision checked can lead to a lot better outcomes as far as prevention of falls. Foot pain or foot problems. Feet are the things that touch the floor first. If we have pain there, then that can definitely lead us to change the way that we stand or we walk, which then can lead us to a higher risk of falling. Another one is people who struggle with neuropathies from diabetes or from other circulatory type problems. It can cause a lack of sensation in your feet. And when you can't feel where your feet are at or on the floor, that makes you feel unsteady. And the other problem that leads to is that we tend to put our eyes down on the floor to look down there. So then we have our center of gravity out over our feet, and that can put us at a higher risk of falling. So those two things, if you have problems in those areas and your physician hasn't gone over anything with you, I'd highly encourage you to schedule a visit. And lastly, when it comes to feet, is footwear. We tend to keep our shoes for a long time because they're expensive, but when the tread's worn out, they don't really serve the purpose they're supposed to. You can't keep that traction. Likewise, things like heels and things like heavy shoes, those can also lead to falls because you just can't control your feet as well. So maybe take a look at your footwear. I know within the house, a lot of us like to go without shoes, which is fine, but some of the problems that can arise from that are some falls. And lastly, speaking of the homes, are just dangers in your own house. The dreaded throw rugs are something that people talk about all the time. While they look pretty and they make your house look homey, they're not always the best for someone that has a problem with balance. Uneven steps or steps that are in need of repair. Steps that don't have arm rails so you can use that assistance if you need it. Other clutter, pets are another one. Pets can get underneath your feet and cause you to have to react a little more quickly. That can lead to a trip or a fall. Same thing could be said for grandchildren or children of your own. There's a whole multitude of things you can look at in your house and make adjustments to, and it's real simple. Another thing we talked about with the vision is just lighting. So putting night lights in your hallways and in your bedrooms. So in the middle of the night when you do need to get up and use the restroom, or, as the day starts to progress and you don't have as much natural light coming in your windows, those night lights can really serve a purpose and show you where some possible dangers would be at. Some other areas of concern within your home are ceramic tile floors. Anytime those get wet, it definitely makes things a little more tricky as far as keeping your balance goes. Just a few thoughts about, the home itself. Let me flip my page to the next one here. So some more factors with your balance I wanted to go over are to know your own limits. Many times there's things that we need to get done around our house that maybe are probably not the smartest thing for us to do. So digging ditches or getting on the roof and cleaning out gutters. You know that getting on a ladder if you have a balance problem is not the smartest thing in the world. Other things would be a lot of heavy yard work, mulching, even push mowing the yard. If those things are a problem for you, the best thing for you to do is try to avoid the behavior altogether, which I know is really challenging. I have a father myself that likes to do things on his own, and he's very stubborn and doesn't like help. So I have to get on his case. And speaking as a child of a father that's getting a little older, my parents did everything for me growing up. And they feel like now if they ask for help, it's an inconvenience. It's not an inconvenience to your children or your grandchildren to pitch in and help you. At the end of the day, we want everyone to be as safe and healthy as possible. And if I can't carve out, half an hour, a couple hours of time out of my weekly schedule to help my parents, then I need to do some reevaluation myself. So please don't feel like you can't lean on people to help you. Many times the inconvenience of waiting a couple hours or a couple of days far outweighs the injury risk that comes from doing that activity on your own. Those of us, especially in the summertime here, we talked about how hot it gets. We like to get outside in the morning before it gets really hot, or we like to work in the evening when the sun's kind of going down and it's not as hot and humid outside. The problems those areas lead to is there's maybe not adequate lighting from the sun in those times. And that can lead to some problems being out in the yard. Also, if you think about the dew that collects on the grass in the mornings and the evening times. So if you have some gardening to do, I would just use some caution those times of the day. especially in areas that maybe you're a little more uneven in your yard. Unevenness can really lead to some problems. And I know people don't like to talk about this, but we're going to have to talk about the weather. And undoubtedly, as we get near the end of August, that means that fall is coming. And with fall comes leaves. And what leaves means you have to clean them out of your yard, and you want to rake them and make sure that they're collected. And that's great. But the problem is leaves get wet, and they can lead to some slippery conditions outside, not to mention some heavy lifting and things like that. Just some things to think about as we get into fall time. And then undoubtedly after the fall time comes the dreaded S word. And with snow comes snow removal. And we see here in therapy a decent influx of people that have had injuries from falls and snow. So please use help. And you have to ask yourself, is it really necessary to go out and shovel the snow, to go outside when we've had a lot of bad weather? Those are decisions that you can make really easily on your own and avoid yourself a horrible time later on. And I want to encourage you to do this as much as possible, and that's ask for help. I don't care if it's family or a neighbor, if it's changing a light because you don't want to have to get on a ladder in the house, regardless of how small or how big it is, I would really encourage you to ask people for help. There are people out there that are definitely willing and able to do that, and we need to lean on them in those times when we have trouble. So what can you do to prevent falls beyond the things we talked about? Talking to your doctor, your healthcare provider is a big thing. Sometimes they can write you a prescription for an assistive device. Canes and walkers are things that insurance companies can pay for if that's an avenue you need to go down. Doctors can also write you prescriptions to come out and see people like myself or the staff at any of the Altman therapy centers. We see people for their balance and their gait problems all the time. And it's really simple things that you can do here in the clinic, and then we'll give you exercises and things to do at home. And we can manage that to fit your schedule regardless of whether you want to come a couple times or you need to come for a month or two. We already talked about reviewing medications, and maybe the vitamin D something, the supplementation of that would be helpful for you. So getting some basic blood work done would be a good idea as well. Just all things that your physician can go over with you in a regular office consult. So what I want to talk about next is just a little bit more of the meat of the program here. And that's strengthening and balance exercises. We do have some balance programs here at Altman, but unfortunately a lot of them have put on hold because of the COVID problem that we have. I had a pay per session class that I would do here at Altman North, to where people come in and pay $5 for a session, and we do an hour of balance and strength training. There's some other Parkinson's type groups through Altman, and there's some balance classes that people have. They're educational, but unfortunately right now those have been placed on hold. We do have a Tai Chi program for seniors in balance as well at Altman Tusk that we would like to get back up and running as soon as the conditions improve enough for us to gather in groups again. But I have an exercise program for you, which we'll go over here in a couple minutes. Some other things that you can think about doing are, making things safer within your home. Altman does have a service that they provide that come in and do a home inspection for you. And they can make recommendations based off of what they see as far as installing grab bars, maybe recommending a raised toilet seat to make things a little easier to get off of your toilet, putting rails on your stairways. Maybe a ramp is something that's more appropriate for you getting in and out of the house than just the regular stairs are. All of those things they can examine and look at for you. And because it's hard to know where to start. And it's really overwhelming at first, especially if this is the first time you've had to think about this problem. But the good news is there's plenty of avenues today in healthcare that can help you manage all those situations. So if Julie can pull up the exercises, we're going to start there. And I'm just going to kind of briefly go over these to you, and I'm going to give you some pointers on how to do them. The one thing I want to make sure that you're clear about also is that walking is an exercise, and walking is an excellent exercise. But to do so, you have to think about where you're walking. Stores, malls, those types of things were really popular. And I know now there's some concern about going out. But if we can get back to the point where, especially when the weather turns, that those avenues are open for you, I would highly recommend trying that. Otherwise, right now, parks serve a pretty good way to socially distance and be outside. You can still get your exercise. Be very cautious with walking as far as hills and uneven surfaces go. I would try to make it something that's very flat, very stable surface, something like a track or a street or a sidewalk, something that you feel very safe in doing. As far as walking distances go, that varies by someone's own conditioning. And that could be, for some people, 10 minutes of a walk is a good thing. Other people, maybe 2 or 3 miles is a far enough walk for you to get some exercise. But that's something that, we can talk about doing in therapy as well, as if you're not quite sure where to start as far as walking or exercise. And these exercises here are good, but they're not tailored to you specifically. I can give you some numbers and some information on how to get a hold of us after this talk is done, and we can go over that with you. But exercising, first and foremost, we want to be in a safe spot. So I recommend being in a kitchen or someplace that has a countertop that you can use for upper extremity support. Secondly, you want to make sure that you have good footwear on. I want to take away any kind of exercise that would require you to be in your stocking feet or your bare feet. And thirdly, pick a time of the day that works best for you. Some of us are morning people, some of us are evening people. Some of us get really tired halfway through the day and exercise isn't going to work later. But pick that point in the day and give these a try. We always want to make sure with the exercises that you're doing it with good posture. So you want to make sure you're standing up nice and tall. Secondly, we want to make sure you're breathing with it. Some people already have blood pressure issues and lung issues. So holding your breath as you concentrate with an exercise is something you need to get past. And another big myth in exercise is this whole no pain, no gain rule. You need to leave that out. That doesn't apply to anybody anymore. We want to work to where you're challenging your muscles, but if it's uncomfortable, we need to think about doing something differently. So the exercise I came up with are pretty safe for most people to do. They shouldn't be painful or uncomfortable as long as you're following those rules. So the first one is just going to work on some hips. So staying at the countertop and doing some marching. It's pretty easy, but some of the ways that people cheat and substitute with this is they lean side to side as they're lifting their knees. You're not really using your hips the way that you want to if you do that. And likewise, some people like to lean front and back. So you don't want to do that either. So you just want to go slow, pace yourself out, maybe even have a chair nearby with your exercise program. So if you get tired, you need a break, it's right there. So it's safe to get to. The next exercise is kind of similar. You still want to stand at the countertop, but you're just going to kick your leg backwards. So this is going to work your bottom muscle. Once again, some of the substitutions I see are people leaning front and back. And one of the problems that people run into with this exercise, if you have any back issues at all, arthritis, history of back surgery, any kind of muscle problems back there, you can limit how far you kick your foot back to keep the exercise comfortable for you. If you look on the sheet, kind of underneath where it talks about what the exercise is, I put down for most of the reps 3 sets of 10. And some people ask, well, how many should I do? Maybe 3 sets of 10 is too challenging for some people right now, then that's fine. Maybe doing 2 sets of 10 is fine. Maybe 2 sets of 10 is too much. Maybe 1 set, or maybe doing 1 set of 10 and 1 set of 5. Even though we all like these round numbers, sometimes the round numbers aren't appropriate for whatever reason, whether it's because it's too hard or it's too easy. So feel free to add or subtract to that. As long as you're doing it safely, I'm not as concerned about the number, as long as you're doing it to the point where you're challenged without discomfort. All right, next exercise on the list. And this is a really important one, at least from what I see. A lot of our seniors that come in are weak in their hips with this muscle in particular. So you're just going to kick to the side. You don't want to be leaning your body side to side as you kick, but this is going to work that muscle on the side of your hip. So you'll feel it kind of tighten up there as you work. If this muscle's weak, it can cause your hips to kind of flare out when you walk. Those subtle little movements like that, translated over speed and time, can lead you to have some balance problems. So you want to make sure that as you do this, you're standing up tall, you're not really kicking out too far to the side, you're keeping it comfortable, but you're working in that range to where you feel those muscles strain and tighten up. The next one, we're moving away from the hips and kind of working more towards your feet and ankles. We talked earlier when we had about shoes and footwear and things like that, how your feet are your first point of contact on the floor. So weak feet can definitely lead to problems with your gait, lead problems to your balance. So this one's pretty simple. All you're gonna do is hold on to the counter and you're just gonna raise up on your toes and then lower back down slowly. When you do this exercise, you wanna make sure that you don't drop hard and fast. Use the muscles to control that descent back down to the floor. You also wanna try and make sure you're working both legs equally. Sometimes if we've had a knee problem or a hip problem for one side, we tend to favor the other. We wanna try and make these exercises balanced as necessary. If this exercise is too challenging for you to do standing up, you can always sit in a chair and do the same motion. You just raise up on your toes and then come back down on your heels. So that's a nice way to make this one a little easier if need be. The next one, this is one I see people do incorrectly a lot. And instead of raising up on your heels, you're gonna pull your toes up instead. So this works this thin ribbon muscle that runs through the front of your shin. A lot of people like to lean front and back with this one, and that really doesn't serve the purpose for you. All you're gonna wanna do is stand with your weight on your heels and try and pull your toes straight up. When these muscles get weak, it limits our ability to correct our unsteady moments. And then we end up overcorrecting, or we end up not even being able to correct because we just don't have strength in this area. So once again, if this one's too tough to do standing up, you can always sit down in a chair and pull the weight or pull the toes up from there. And then if you are doing these exercises in the chair, once they get easy in the chair, then go ahead and try and stand them up again. Just use your better judgment when it comes to when that's ready. If you're doing them sitting down and you can do 30 reps pretty easily, it's probably time to stand up. Okay, moving along. This one's gonna work your hamstring muscles. And they're the muscles that sit right behind your thigh. So this one, once again, is gonna be in standing with the support of a countertop or something really sturdy. All you're gonna do is bend your knee and raise your foot until it gets a little bit stiff in the knee or it gets a little stiff in the thigh, and then you're gonna lower it back down nice and easy. Sometimes people have a tendency to wanna lift their knee up into a march as they do that. You don't wanna do that. All you wanna do is keep your knees together and just bend the knee. And since we're doing these exercises, both legs, I'm gonna leave it up to you guys, whether you wanna try and do 10 on the left and then 10 on the right and go back and forth that way, or if you prefer to try and do all 3 sets at one time on one leg, there's really not a wrong way to do that. But the key is, once again, to do them correctly and do them safely and get to the point where you're feeling some fatigue and some strain in the muscles. If you do have some knee problems, you can always adjust the height on how much you bend on this exercise, because once again, we don't want to work through pain. And next one we have Okay, I think I might have printed that one off twice. Can you scroll down one more? Thank you, yeah. All right, usually when people hear that word squat, they start to cringe right away because squat means pain and people don't like to squat. But the reality of it is that we squat all day long. Every time you sit in a chair and you get up, every time you sit down in your car and you go to get out, that's a squat. So to do the exercise, it's important because we want to strengthen in the planes in which we live in. And this is something that we do all the time. So the basic starter point is standing at the counter, and you're going to bend your knees and you're going to stick your bottom out, and you're just going to bend to where it tightens up slightly in your knees, and then you're going to come back up straight. So some people really struggle with the technique on how to do this. So a nice way to cheat and help you with that is to put a chair behind you. And all you're going to do is act like you're going to sit in the chair, but you don't necessarily have to put your bottom down on the seat. But that'll help you with how to do it properly so you're not straining your back during it. For some people that feel too unbalanced doing it this way, a nice way to do it instead is to sit in a chair and just stand up from the chair and then sit back down, and you can repeat that. For someone that's really weak and has a hard time getting out of a chair, a way to make this exercise a little more tolerable if you're going to sit from the chair is to put a couple pillows underneath your bottom. That'll raise you up so then you can get up out of the chair a little easier. And then as you get stronger, you can start to remove a pillow or two or none at all and try and go straight from the chair seat. But this is a really important exercise. I would really encourage you to find a way to try and add this into your routine if you haven't done it already. I can't stress that enough. And the next one is the mini squat from the chair. We already talked about this. I want you to do one or the other. That's the key here. Don't do 30 squats and then do 20 or 30 chair squats because that's just too much on your body. So pick one or the other to go to. All right. So posture is something I talked about when we first got into the exercise. People that have bad posture, they have a tendency to want to lean forward. Their shoulders round forward, your head starts to protrude forward. You can even flex your trunk forward. And that can be from a number of reasons. It can be from weakness. It can be from changes in the alignment of your spine. Arthritis can change the way that our spine sits. And it can also be from some tightness in the front of our chest, in the front of our hips. But I wanted to give you something that's not too hard, but it'll help you think about correcting any kind of postural problems you have. And what I told you guys to do in this exercise log is to stand against the wall. That way balance isn't going to be a problem. You have your back supported and it's real easy. All you're going to do is squeeze your shoulder blades together. And it doesn't have to be a big squeeze. It's just enough to feel those muscles tighten up between those shoulder blades. And you're going to want to hold it for about 5 seconds, and then you're going to relax. And it's that easy. If standing up's a problem because of a back issue, you can always do it in a chair. It's always a nice way to change it up. But once again, posture is really big. It's something we focus a lot on in therapy if someone has an issue with that. All right, then the real fun starts up here. So there's 2 types of balance problems that people have. Static, which means stationary, not moving around, but standing in one place, or dynamic, which means walking. I'm going to focus on the static balance because it's the safest thing that you can do at home without having any kind of additional instruction. So once again, we want to get into a safe place with a countertop or something sturdy to have in front of us. In this first exercise, all you're going to do is put your feet together. So you're narrowing your base of support, which is going to make you feel unsteady. And you're going to stand there for 30 to 60 seconds. What you can do is hover your hands over the countertop or whatever surface you're at. Just in case you start to feel unbalanced, you can put your hands down to catch your unsteadiness. And maybe a couple reps of that. A way to make this exercise harder is to close your eyes, but I really don't want anyone to do that. And I think that that's too hard for someone just with an entry-level balance program. But once again, feel free to add and subtract time to the amount of time you're standing there. Shoes on once again, and I want this on a stable surface, like a hard surface. Doing this on like a tile floor or a laminate or wood floor is going to be much better and safer for you than trying to do this on a carpeted surface. The carpet just puts too much unsteadiness under your feet. The next one is probably the hardest balance exercise I have on the program for you guys, and that's standing on one leg. Most people, when they come in here, we have them using at least an arm or a few fingers from one arm on the surface they're standing at for some balance assistance. And I ranged it out from 10 to 15 seconds to hold that balance. That's a pretty good amount of time to start with. But once again, good posture, making sure that you use the assist from your arm as much as you feel you need to safely, but you should feel unsteady to some degree on your feet. And I would alternate your legs on this one. Try to do one on the left and then one on the right and go back and forth because you're going to avoid a lot of excessive fatigue at this point. And speaking of a fatigue factor, some people would prefer to do the balance before they do the strengthening, or some people prefer to do the strengthening before the balance. I really don't have a preference for that. It's really up to you guys how you want to work it, but I think they're all important. The next one is another tough one, and this is standing kind of in tandem. So it'd be one foot right in front of the other, almost like you're standing on a tightrope. If you have back problems or hip problems and standing in that position is painful to you, you can always separate your feet out slightly. That way they're not stretched in tandem, and that'll help alleviate some pain that you have there. But once again, use your arms or your fingers if you need to help support you. 20 to 30 seconds hold time is pretty good. And you're going to practice alternating legs. So if you start off with the right one forward, after that 30 seconds or so, switch and do the left one forward, and then switch back to the right again. That way you're making sure that you're not overstraining one part of your body. And try the best you can to keep the weight even between the feet. Sometimes we have a tendency to rock our weight onto that back foot, and that's not the way you want to do this. And I think the last one I kind of threw in there, it's in the strengthening category, and it's really simple. You get to sit for it, and it's just a leg extension. So you're just going to kick your leg out in front of you, maybe pause at the top of the motion, and then let it come back down nice and easy. Once again, this is an exercise that if people have some knee problems, they may want to limit how far they straighten their knee out. That way you're not working through pain. But once again, even if you're sitting down, posture is still something you need to think about. So I don't want you sitting with your shoulders rounded forward. Try and sit up as tall as you can and lean into that chair back so you have some support for your back. There is a ton more exercise I could throw at you, but for the purpose of a health talk and for someone that's maybe not exercised before, I wanted to keep it pretty simple. Some of the questions as I've done this in person have been resistance, and can we add weight, or can we use a band for resistance? And I'd say, yes, you can. But a couple things to think about with adding resistance is, once again, it should not be uncomfortable. And once again, if you can only do 5 or 6 reps with some weight on, that's probably too heavy for you. I would start off with something really easy. So if you've not done any weight, maybe 1 or 2 pounds for a cuff weight is appropriate to start. If you have bands at home, I'm not sure how the color coding works for every band system, but here for Altman's purposes, we go from yellow to orange to green to blue. So the yellow and the orange one will be the nice starting point for you if you're going to use those for resistances. Beyond that, if you already are working out at a YMCA or at Planet Fitness or something like that, then please go ahead, keep doing that workout there. Staying consistent with that's going to keep your legs stronger. But if you haven't added any balance things into your program, maybe take the balance portion of what we showed you there and go ahead and add that into what you're doing to supplement it. It should be a good thing for you to continue with.